People who write readable R code and readable scripts, and that is going to include you. Use a style guide. Even experts use a style guide. Although what happens once you have a style guide and start using it is that the more you write scripts, the less you have to refer back to the style guide. It starts to become automatic. And that's one of the whole purposes of having a style guide, is to lead you from something that you have to think about to something that, with expertise, becomes an automated process. So I am going to require you to create a personal style guide. I think the best place to start is to look at the style guides of others. Once you've done that, you can borrow from those and create your own style based upon that of others. You can even adopt someone else's style guide as your own, although I want you to show it as your style guide. But know that if you do that, it means you have to adhere to everything that they do when you do your scripting. You may or may not want to do that. A style guide will keep your scripts consistent. A style guide will keep your scripts readable. I've provided some links to sample style guides, and I will also have these available for you on Blackboard. Let's take a look at these. Google has an R style guide because Google has people hired for the purpose of writing R scripts. Here is Google's R style guide. Now, some of the things that they talk about in this style guide, for instance, pipes, are items that we have not discussed yet, so you should not put those in your style guide right now. What you're going to be able to do with your style guide is to start with the basics and then add to it as you learn more elements about the R language. I'm even going to allow you to change that, because once you start using a style, you might discover that you'd prefer to do something else. I don't want you to be imprisoned by your style guide. I want the style guide to be a dynamic document that evolves to match your style, to allow you to write better scripts and maintain consistency in your scripts. Note that it says the R style guide, the Google R style guide, is a fork of the Tidyverse style guide. We're going to learn about forks in this lesson as well, and we're also going to look at the Tidyverse style guide. Hadley Wickham is probably the best known R programmer out there, and here's his initial style guide that he used, which I think you'll find very useful when you create your own style guide. He illustrates each style by showing what you should do and what you shouldn't do, which is always a good thing to have in a style guide. That helps clarify what you mean by each style. This isn't very long, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. But he now has another style guide that's substantially more advanced and has way more than you're going to want to use right now. He calls it the Tidyverse style guide because it's for people who are going to work in the Tidyverse. Guess what? In the second half of the course, you're going to work heavily in the Tidyverse. That doesn't mean that you're going to forget or need to forget or be allowed to forget all the things you're learning in the first half of the course with Base R, because we're going to integrate those into what we do in the Tidyverse. So stay tuned for that. But that's where the name comes from, the Tidyverse style guide. And notice in this Tidyverse style guide, it's like a book. Here's the table of contents on the left. He talks in detail about style, even at the end here, talking about style when working with Git and GitHub. So this is a very extensive style guide. You might want to bookmark this. I do not recommend that you adopt this style guide for your own in its entirety. For one thing, that's going to create a lot of work for you when you show me your own style guide. But I do recommend you bookmark this because as you learn more of the R programming language, you're going to come upon things where you say, I don't have that in my style guide, and you might want to look at what Hadley Wickham says. So for instance, when we start to learn how to write our own functions, you might look to how does he suggest that we do the return on a function, and you can come over here and see how he does it. So this is probably the most complete style guide that you're going to find on the web, and it is a fabulous one to refer back to and to use as a reference. But more along the lines of what you're going to do initially is to use style guides of individual R coders that are not as well known, like Gene Fahn, who has a nice little R style guide, but look at how much shorter it is than Hadley Wickham's. Just a short little brief sweet style guides with the main kinds of things that you are going to need when you start writing R scripts. And here's one from the site R Bloggers, which is a site that I enjoy using frequently for many different aspects of R because it's a combination of blog posts from a whole lot of people that are blogging in R. And again, this is going to be a pretty straightforward, simple starting point. But notice that every style guide indicates with a header what they're talking about. They say what you should do, and then they give examples of good and bad to show what not to do and to show what to do. So your style guide needs to contain those elements. But this is not a very long style guide, and it's a great style guide for getting started. Regardless of who you draw on, I want you to have a style guide, and when I grade your work in your scripts, part of the grading is going to be on style. Even when you do just little 2 or 3 lines in an exercise, I want you to follow your style guide. So once you have your style guide in place, and I've looked at it and I've approved it, if I ask for edits, once you've edited it, then you need to start applying it every time you write your scripts.